Hello, guten Tag, and welcome to another making of. This time it's for our short film, Two Truths, One Lie, that we released last year, or 2 years ago. Well, it's been a while, but better late than never. In this detailed video, I want to go over everything, from the idea, the pre-production, all the way to all the equipment that we used, as well as some filmmaking techniques that we used to really drive the story home. And since this is going to be a fairly long video, let's not waste any more time and jump right into it. And this video is sponsored by Milanote, but I will talk about this a little bit more a little later. So the first thing I want to talk about is how this whole project came together, because I saw some comments on the actual video. Most of them were really positive and I really liked how we made this film, but some said that the story wasn't that good. And I do agree to a point, and there's a reason for it, so I would like to share it with you. Initially, all I wanted to do was make a tutorial on how to film a dinner scene. And then I decided that I want to give my two actors a little bit of a dialogue just to showcase how we filmed everything and how we did the audio. So I started writing a dialogue. And then I came up with something that I kind of liked. And then I felt like maybe we add a scene to it and expand on it a little bit. And then I just got the ball rolling, and well, here we are. Then we had a crew and cast of 10 people and it became a whole thing. And I wrote this dialogue and the script and the screenplay and everything basically in 24 hours after I came up with the idea of filming a dinner scene. So of course it's not an elaborate short film that was ever meant to be a short film in the first place. I just really wanted to make a small tutorial, but then I decided, hey, why not just make a short film out of it? So now that instead of making just a small tutorial, we wanted to make an entire film, there was a lot to be planned and prepared, because now instead of just needing 2 people and maybe myself, I just needed an entire crew and also 2 people that can act. And that brings us to step number 2 of our short film making of, and that is the pre-production. In the early days of my career, I kind of neglected pre-production a little bit and I didn't take it as serious as I should have, and it did bite me in the butt a couple of times. And it kind of also did bite us in the butt on this project, but I will talk about this in a second. But nowadays, I really do try to focus on pre-production a lot, because it makes your life so much easier, not only on the day of shooting, but also in post-production. So now whenever I start a new project, and this would be a documentary, a commercial project, or a short film like this one, I use Milanote. I personally think that Milanote is the perfect tool for filmmakers for all kinds of pre-production, and I've been using Milanote way before they reached out to me for a potential sponsorship, so I can wholeheartedly say that I did actually pay for this with my own money, and I used it on this short film way before they started reaching out. So after I finished my screenplay, I knew exactly how many people I need on set, and I reached out to a couple of my friends as well as in local groups, and I found a cool crew as well as 2 cast members. Then I went into Milanote and I started to create a main page for this project with all the necessary information at one glance that I could then share with all the other people involved. And this is so powerful to have on smaller projects, but especially on bigger projects, where you have all the information and everything you need in one document that you can share with all the crew and cast members, and you can access it from your phone, iPad, or your computer wherever you are. And not only can the people that you shared with view everything, but they can also add stuff on their own, and they can make comments and edit stuff. On this main page, I put down the location so that everybody knows where to be, and Milanote has a pre-designed tool for this, so you can directly connect it to Maps or Google Maps and navigate straight to the location. And the next step is that I also put down the phone numbers and names of all the crew and cast members. And this comes in so handy, because now everybody knows who's in charge of what, and then they can reach out to the person they actually need to talk to. For example, maybe the gaffer has a question for the cinematographer, so they can text or call them. And same goes for maybe hair and makeup, and they can get in touch with the cast members so they know what to bring on set and what kind of style they want. And if you don't have that in one place, because a lot of the times the crew members don't know each other before the shoot, and then they have to reach out to that one person that knows everybody and ties everything together, and that just gets exhausting. I also put down the timetable on the main page because this was supposed to be a one-day shoot. Spoiler alert, we didn't finish in one day, so we had to add a second day of shooting. But usually for a one-day shoot, I just put the timetable on the main page so everybody knows when to be there and how long it takes. But on even more complex projects, you can just add another section and do a very intricate and detailed timetable too. Now, to not clutter up our main page too much, we can actually add some subsections, and they're called boards in Milanote. I added one subsection just for the screenplay so that everybody has access to it, and then the next step was to create a mood board. A mood board is basically just a collection of different reference shots, and I went on Shot Deck, I believe, to just find some shots from different movies and different TV shows of a vibe that I could see using for this project. And this is very easy but also very important because it gives the entire crew and cast an idea of what the final product will look like. You can also add a rough color palette to it, make notes so that everybody is on the same page. And also Milanote has pre-designed templates for this, so you can add the different colors and the color palette that you like. So if you do have a set designer, they now know what kind of props to bring, and the cast knows what kind of clothes to wear and what colors, etc, etc. It should also clearly communicate a vibe you're going for so that the cinematographer and the gaffer already know what kind of lights to bring, what kind of mood to set on the day of the shoot. I then also added a to-do list for all the stuff that needs to be prepared before the shoot, and then I added an equipment checklist, so maybe some people bring their own equipment so that we have an overview of what we need on the day of the shooting, and we can just check it off to make sure that we actually have it. Since this was only a one-day shoot and again like very shortly and spontaneously planned, I thought we probably don't need a shot list or even a storyboard for this one. And that was definitely a mistake. I had a really good idea of what kind of shots I want, but the problem is that a lot of the times you just need some transition shots. So how do we go from this scene to this scene? Or how do we tie these couple shots together? And we spend so much time on the day of shooting just trying to figure out how to go from this shot to this shot, from this scene to the next. And that ended up costing us so much time that we didn't even get to wrap up the filming in one day. So now in hindsight, what I would have done differently is I would have just taken an hour to go to the location with my phone, take some pictures, and just make a rough storyboard / shot list. And in Milanote, you also have templates. You have templates for all kind of filmmaking things, and there's a storyboard as well as a shot list in there. So it makes it incredibly easy just to add some pictures to it, add notes, or if you want to, you can also add a detailed description of every shot. So like I said, when it comes to pre-production, Milanote has been my #1 tool that I work with on every project that I start. And it's so powerful to have all the information in one place for all crew and cast to access at all times. So if you're interested in Milanote, then check out the link down in the description below and sign up for free today. Next up, let's quickly talk about all the crew and cast members. My role on set was being the director as well as the director of photography. And in hindsight, that was kind of stressful because I had to take care of so many things at once. But since I also had a couple of other people on set that helped me with everything, it was actually quite fine. We also had Carla as the assistant director on set, so she could take care of the actors and add stuff in and also take care of the timetable and everything in between while I was doing either this one job or the other. So that was a huge help too. And then we had Pontus as my first AC, and he was mainly pulling focus and helping me rigging out the camera whenever we needed changes. Then we had Nina as the second AC, and her job was taking care of the camera slate. And this is something that I also highly recommend, especially when you're doing a narrative project with different takes and different scenes. Then you need to stay organized because otherwise it's going to be an absolute nightmare in post-production. And I could do an entire video just on how to use a slate, and if you're interested in this, then let me know down in the comments below. Next up, we had Freddy as our gaffer, so he was in charge of lighting. So whenever I told him what I want the next scene to look like, he just set everything up and he lit the entire scene. Then we did a little bit of fine tuning together, but overall that was such a huge help. And then we had Vitor in the role of the grip, whose job is to help the gaffer set everything up. And he's basically the one that sets up all the tripods, secures everything, etc, etc. But he did so much more on set. He also kind of doubled as a third AC to help me with the camera rigs and other things as well. Next up we had Matthias on sound design, and that was such a huge help because I didn't have to think about sound whatsoever. I never really noticed him being there. I was just focused on the acting, the directing, as well as on camera and visuals, and he was just there to capture the sound, and he did this perfectly, and I didn't have to worry about anything, and that is what a good crew member should be. And then we had Lely as hair and makeup, and she did a really great job of taking care of our two main actors. And then we have Franco, our male actor, and he does have some experience in acting, even in the commercial work. And then on the opposite side, we had Laura, and it was her acting debut. She's never acted in front of a camera before, but for this she did a really great job. And last but not least, we had Justin on behind the scenes, so that you can enjoy all of these nice behind the scenes shots. So now that we've done all the pre-production, let's talk about the equipment that we used on the day of shooting, starting with the camera equipment. As our camera of choice, we used the Red Komodo 6K, and that is an amazing camera for narrative and planned projects, because you have all the time and the quality coming out of this camera is absolutely amazing. And you can just use it in small spaces if you rig it down, and that was really helpful because we had one scene where we put the camera in a fridge, and we also had another scene where we put it on an improvised snorri cam, and that would have not been possible with a bigger camera. But then for all the other shots, I could just rig it out bigger with all the bells and whistles so that my first AC can work with it and I can work with it really well on sticks as well as on a shoulder mount. And I used my bright tangerine cage for it with a Caspa shoulder mount system. And if you're interested in all the parts, I will link down a rig video of this Komodo build for you to check out. Since I knew that I wanted to film this on Anamorphic and I also wanted to give it a little bit of a retro vibe, I decided to go with a really interesting combination of lenses. We only used one focal length really, but it's a combination of a prime lens as well as an anamorphic adapter, hence lenses I guess. The main lens we used was a 70-year-old Russian lens, and it's the Helios M44-2, and this one is really unique. It's a 58mm prime lens at a t2.0, and it comes with this really nice and unique swirly bokeh. And this would have made for a really great setup in and of itself, but I decided to go a step further and add an anamorphic lens adapter. And the anamorphic lens adapter that I chose was the Aivascope 1.5x, and it also has its own characteristic and a little bit of a vintage vibe to it, so it comboed really well with the Helios M44-2. The combination was a little finicky to work with because you have this 70-year-old really tiny prime lens, and then you need to slap this anamorphic adapter on it, you need to align it perfectly. Pulling focus on it is also not that easy. It's overall also not the sharpest combo because both of them are a little bit soft, the prime lens more so than the adapter, especially because we shot everything wide open, but overall I really like the look coming out of this combination, especially in combination with the sensor of the Red Komodo 6K. As my tripod of choice, I used the Sachtler Flowtech 75, and that was a great tool because we changed angles a lot, and also when we went upstairs I wanted to have some different kind of Dutch angles, and the Sachtler tripod is just very easy to set up and switch heights and angles, so that was very important for me. As our main monitor of choice, we used the Atomos Sumo 19 SE, and that kind of coupled as a director's / focus pull monitor. While I was filming, Pontus was pulling focus, but then afterwards I could just play it back on the big screen to see all the micro expressions and stuff in the background and the framing on the big screen, so that was very helpful. When it comes to the sound equipment, I have no idea what we used because I wasn't in charge of sound. I had a professional sound engineer on set and he used all of his own equipment. I'm pretty sure he talks through what he used in the behind the scenes, so if you haven't checked this one out, then check it out down in the description below. But overall, I was just happy to have him on set, not have to worry about sound at all, and the sound coming out of whatever he delivered afterwards was perfect. So the last piece of equipment I want to talk about is our improvised snorri cam. A snorri cam is basically a camera rig that you strap to the actors so that it moves exactly when they move. And this kind of gives off this surreal vibe that is often used for people being drunk, intoxicated, on drugs, or just desperate in general. And I wanted to go for this look. So initially I was looking to rent a snorri cam, but they're expensive as hell. I think it was a couple $100 just for renting it for one day. And I was like, I'm not willing to spend this for this essentially no budget short film. So we had to improvise. So all we did here is use a monopod with a tripod head and then have a stripped down Komodo on the end of it. And we had our actress hold it, and when she was moving around, you couldn't really see her arms anyway, so that was kind of a trade-off, but we were fine with it. And then it really mimicked her movement quite well. We also had a second person standing behind there, so they could also just hold the camera just to secure everything. And obviously this wasn't great, but since it was only this one shot for a couple seconds, I really didn't see the need of getting an expensive snorri cam, and that did the trick. Next up, let's talk a little bit about our lighting equipment. And I don't want to talk too much about this because I made a full lighting breakdown of our upstairs dinner scene, and you can check it out. The link is also down in the description below. For our downstairs kitchen scene, we used an Intelitech Lightcloth 3.0 Mega 6 as our key light. I knew that I wanted to have a cozy, moody indoor kitchen scene. And as you could see in our mood board, I had some references for this. And I wanted to use a top light, and I also wanted to make it really soft. So the Intelitech Mega 6 was perfect for this because it's a huge soft light source that also is quite light, so that we can actually just mount it above our actors. Since we were surrounded by white walls, it was very important that we could control our light source. Luckily for us, the Intelitech Mega 6 also has an additional accessory that is perfect for this. It's a lantern with a skirt. And the skirt just gives us full control over the spill. We can just add it a little bit more on one side or just take it off on the other. The light is not only bicolor, it's also fully RGB, so we could perfectly just dial in the exact color temperature that we wanted. Since the Intelitech Mega 6 is such a huge light source, it was enough to just light both of our actors, and we didn't need any other key light. For the background, we used a Nanlite for the B with a spotlight mount. So here we could just mimic a window light coming in at a different color temperature just to break off the scene a little bit and add more interest to the background. And then we also used some practical lamps in the background of the reverse shot, again to just make it a little bit more interesting and to have the background not so flat. When moving upstairs, we had a lot of practical lights in form of light bulbs, and we used them to motivate our light source later for our key light. For the first scene, when they were entering the rooftop, we couldn't really set up the huge light source overhead because it was a wide shot. So what we did is we used a smaller version of it, and that was the Intelitech Lightcloth LC160. And then we just boomed it over our two actors, and we could actually move with them. So that came in really handy. We also used the same light for our very last scene, boomed it above our talent because we had her standing up, and again we didn't really want to set up the entire light source, and the smaller light source was plenty. When finally setting up for our main dinner scene, we used the same Intelitech Mega 6 again, and we boomed it above our actors, and we basically did the exact same thing that we did down in the kitchen. Instead of the small Forza light to light the background, we now used the Forza 500B, and we shot it through a reflector at a really high color temperature to mimic moonlight and therefore also create color contrast to the opposite of mimicking our light bulbs from above. And again, if you're interested in the full lighting breakdown of this scene, then just check it out up here. So now that we've talked about all the equipment, the pre-production and how everything came together, let's talk about some filmmaking techniques we used to really drive the story home. When the film starts, the viewer doesn't really know what's going on and where the film will take them. So I wanted to create a cozy and safe atmosphere. We did this via warm and inviting lighting, but also via framing. In our wide shots, our mid shots, but also in our over-the-shoulder dialogue shots, we always had both of them in there, especially in the over-the-shoulder shots. And that suggests connection to our both actors, so that we feel like they're connected to each other and they're just on good terms. We did want to hint at something not necessarily being as it seems in two little instances. For once, when they were talking about that he never really had somebody over for the third date, then he finds this earring on the kitchen counter, so he just tries to hide it, so you can already tell that something isn't right. The next instance was when he's going to the fridge and she was talking about her mother, and he's kind of zoning out, and also like he's completely droning her out in the background and there's just static noise, but it quickly goes back to him being this flirty, charismatic guy. We continue the same mood when going upstairs. It's still very inviting and warm, and they're just flirtatious with each other. He's dropping this one hint about nobody would hear her scream, while she is thinking about one thing, he might be thinking about something else. Now, when they're having their dinner conversation, it's still the same continuation of downstairs. Whenever we film the dialogue scene, we have both of them in frame, so they are still connected. But the further the story progresses, we start isolating both of our actors more and more, and we start pushing in the camera so that we only have one person in frame, so that they're not feeling connected to each other, but isolated and on their own. We also started to switch up our camera angles, and we did this in two different parts. When we were filming him, we used a lot of low angles, and that makes him look larger than life, also maybe a little bit more dangerous and just bigger in general. Whereas when we were filming her, we did the opposite. We filmed her from above, so that makes her look smaller and vulnerable. And in part 2, we started to introduce Dutch angles. And all that means is that we started to tilt the camera and just get more and more crooked shots. The combination of the low and high angles, as well as them being crooked, just naturally introduces some discomfort on the viewer part. To drive this even further in the very last shots, we also switched up the lighting a little bit. Where it was very warm and inviting in the beginning, we introduced a little bit more of some cooler light tones, like the purple, or in the very last scene, while she was already being drugged and he was towering over her, we introduced some red lights, just to emphasize the danger she was in. When it comes to the editing as well as the color grading of the short, it was really basic. The sound design is, well, pretty obvious, where we started with jazz music in the background where we're still comfortable and some minor sound design. We progressed to introduce more and more tense and suspense music towards the end of the film. And when it comes to color grading, I just basically did a basic color correction of the footage. And then I added one of my custom creative LUTs, and the one that I used here is called Brown Sugar, and you can find it in the Spades LUT pack, and there's a link down to the store in the description below. So the last category I quickly want to touch on is the budget that we use, because this is a question that comes up all the time. And it's quite weird, because technically it was a zero budget short film. We didn't buy any props, we didn't rent a location, because we just filmed it here at my home, and everybody was working for free because that was just a personal project we did. And the camera equipment I already owned. So it's kind of weird, because in a way that, yeah, we didn't use any budget, literally zero, except for maybe the food that I bought. But other than that, I already had like tens and tens of thousands of filmmaking equipment that you would have had to rent if you don't own it. So it's always a kind of weird thing to say that it was a zero budget project, because you usually associate this with filming on a phone. But if you do have a production company or a YouTube channel and you already have all this equipment, it's not really a zero budget short film, but you could have rented all of this and it wouldn't have run you all that much either. And there you have it. This was the full making of our short film 2 Truths 1 Lie. I hope you liked it. And if you did, then please give this video a thumbs up, because it really helps the channel grow. Subscribe for more, because there will be a lot more lighting breakdowns in the very near future. I also plan to film at least one more short film this year, and probably even a full-size documentary. So subscribe for this. And if you have any more questions, let me know down in the comments below. And make sure to check out Milanote. Link is also down in the description.